Welcome to the September 11th, 2013 work session of Richmond Community Schools Board of School Trustees. This evening, as we, before we do the pledge, I would like to ask everyone to join us in a moment of silence to honor those who perished at the 9/11 tragedy, or for those who were injured, and obviously for those heroes that helped during that day. So please rise for a moment of silence, and then we will do the pledge to the flag. Thank you. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, our statement of mission.
Before I read this, I'd like to thank you, Madam President, for allowing us to take a little time to commemorate 9/11 and the men and women who lost their lives during that day. I was surprised today to receive a phone call from the wife of a good friend of mine who had passed away. I lost 3 friends that morning, and this was a phone call that came out of the blue, and I was not expecting it because we had not been able to really talk for a long time due to the emotions of it all. And thank you for taking this time before we begin the meeting with honoring them, because I know it's been 12 years. Some people it's been a million years. Some people, as we learned today, still relive it every moment of every day. So I want to thank you. And she happens to be a school teacher. So something very important, and it's with pleasure I read our mission statement, which is Richmond Community Schools will graduate students who are literate, responsible, proficient in state and national standards, and college and career ready.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks for those words. Let's see, our vision.
Board vision. By 2020, Richmond Community Schools will be the highest performing school system in East Central Indiana.
Thank you. And now we are ready to celebrate the joy of learning.
And we have an unusual celebration of the joy of learning because it's actually a request for an approval. Mr. Coddington, would you like to present this?
Now we ask the board to approve the following donations to the Richmond High School Band to purchase new percussion line, Richmond High School to support the Challenge Day, and from Charles Elementary, Crestdale, Fairview, Elizabeth Starr Academy, Vale Elementary, and Westview Elementary to support positive behavior programs. All of these graciously donated by the Stan Coachline Family Foundation. We ask the board tonight to accept the donations of $28,600.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Jeff Slifer, seconded by Pat Heine. Comments or questions? Pat.
Monica Koschlein, who was a former teacher and who is now president and director of this foundation, has been extremely supportive and is not only seeing that we got money, but she actually participates with many of the organizations. Having said that, I want you all to put January 13th through 16th on your calendar as Challenge Day, because you will have an opportunity to participate once again for Challenge Day. So it is that week, so mark your calendars.
Thank you. The number of students that will be affected by that $28,000 is certainly significant. Many of our students will reap the benefits, so we certainly thank them. Any other comments or questions?
It should be noted that this isn't the first time.
Correct.
We have been generously given gifts from that foundation, that family foundation, and we do appreciate every.
And the fun of giving the percussion, the drum line, the night before the band contest, you remember seeing all that? Terribly
Yes,
exciting.
they were excited about those new drums. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Now we're ready for the action items.
The action items tonight actually are the culmination of all of the budget activity that we have had throughout the summer. So, Mr. Coddington, I invite you to bring forward these recommendations on our budgets for next year.
As we continue in the budget process, the board finishes up their action this evening. Should they approve the budgets as presented after we've had public commentary, or the opportunity for public commentary. But to understand the budget process doesn't stop now, so I'll give a 30-second. If you approve it tonight, we take it to the courthouse tomorrow, and the public has another 10 days for a remonstrance. If there is no remonstrance, then it's forward to the DLGF, Department of Local Government Finance, and they will have it for 2 to 3 months to come up and come back with a finalized budget. So, as it always is, a long and arduous process, but one that I think everybody has an opportunity to voice their opinion and understand just how we put the school budget together. So tonight I ask the board to adopt our budget adoption, approve and sign the 2014 budgets as presented on budget forms 1 through 4, including the adoption of budget form 4, resolution of appropriations and tax rates.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Aaron Stevens, seconded by Kelly Baumgartner. Comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you. Now, our capital projects plan has gone under the same scrutiny, and therefore I ask the School Board of Trustees to adopt the 2014-16 Capital Projects Fund Plan as presented, and that the administration be given permission to publish the notice of adoption.
Okay, all in favor, all in favor, what?
Okay.
Got the cart before the horse here.
He's ready to get this one over.
And that's right. Well, I was just thinking, we're moving along nicely. So,
We'll move.
okay, Pat Heine makes the motion, seconded by Kelly Baumgartner. Comments or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you. As we continue, we presented the bus plan under the same scrutiny, and we ask the board tonight to adopt the 2014 to 2025 bus replacement plan as presented.
So moved.
Motion made by Jeff Schleifer, seconded by Dixie Robinson. Comments or
We all
questions?
started one of them.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you. That takes care of the budget. Now, as we said, as we put this budget together, the board, the DLGF can lower a budget, but they can't raise it. So we've advertised high. Now, when they come back with their final budget, we'll have to make cuts. And this will be during the process, and what we ask for every year is a line 2 resolution budget to give me the authority to reduce the budget to the state allocated amount, probably during the month of December when it comes. Therefore, the Board of Trustees, we ask that you approve the 2014 budget line 2 resolution and grants the Richmond Community Schools Treasurer Robert Coddington the proper authority to reduce line 2 on Form 3 for the 2014 budgets.
Okay, motion made by Dixie Robinson.
Second.
Seconded by Aaron Stevens. Comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you. And the last thing tonight is, we've done this since 2004, we cannot raise our taxes to pay for the teacher pension bond buyout that we had in 2004. So every year, we have to bring this to the public's attention and to the board's attention and ask for a tax neutrality resolution to make sure that this debt does not raise our taxes. Therefore, we ask the Board of Trustees to approve the tax neutrality resolution as presented.
Thank you. Motion made by Kelly Baumgardner, seconded by Suzanne Darengowski. Comments or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
And now, moving on to consent items.
Our consent items tonight consist of the approval of minutes from our last meeting, a recommendation by Human Resources with an addendum as posted to the web, recommendation from the Exceptional Student Education, recommendation for Title III, would that be Title III grant?
Grant.
Approval, okay. And a deduct change order approval from Dennis Intermediate School. 5.06 I would like to omit from this group of consent items. So items 5.01, 2, 3, 4, and 5 I would recommend for approval.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Suzanne Darengowski, seconded by Jeff Slifer. Comments or questions? Jeff?
What was the deduct change order on the Dennis School? What was it a deduct sum of money, or because that document?
That was from the gymnasium project.
Because we did one, didn't we do one a month ago on the gymnasium? Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Pat?
Yes, I could not find previous Title III. Does this, and this is all about English as new language instruction, does this recognize more money for more services this year given our student body, or is it just kind of what we have been doing?
The amount has not changed. I suspect it will next year.
Next
because,
year, okay.
We'll have a higher ADM of students who are eligible, but
Because this was based on a
Previous years.
previous year. What struck me was, for some, this is just an editorial comment, I was just wondering if that was enough to really make a difference for some kids who can't speak English, especially the older kids in high school when they come, and absolutely none.
well, the Title III is a little different than Title I or Title II because we, by federal law, it's called a allow requirement. We are supposed to meet the needs of these children through general fund. These are supposed to be supplemental dollars, and so we use them to provide one extra instructional interpreter, and so the kids can get a little bit higher intensity of services, but we can't use these funds to provide required
Basics, okay. That's good to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I do reserve the right to bring back the prom and the riverboat.
Okay.
That
high
was the
school
question I was going to ask you.
You're just not prepared tonight to
All right.
present that.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. And now we are ready for our work session.
6.01, which is the strategic plan, and 6.02, pathways, really are a combined item. The way this should look would be 6.01 and then 6.01A. But Board Docs doesn't allow that kind of arrangement. So it appears as two separate items. They are not two separate items. What I would like to do is have a conversation first on the pathways, because that will help steer our direction in a number of ways on the strategic plan, and we can talk about that as soon as we're finished. On the pathways, if you recall, we talked about scheduling some times for the board to meet with some students. We have some times that we have scheduled through the principals, and we would like to throw those out tonight for board consideration. What I would like to do is have at least one board member for every one of these meetings. There could be two, there could even be three board members, but at least one, and then I or someone else would accompany you. And once we talk about that, we can actually talk about the questions that we'll be asking
Yeah.
the students.
So are you suggesting that we cannot have more than 3?
If you have more than 3, then we would have to post that as an open board meeting. And I don't think that's the intent of our meeting with the students.
Okay. Do you want,
If you'd like to talk about that with the board, that'd be great.
okay, it looks like, and probably what we'll need to do is to, at some point, post these dates, and people then can look at their calendars. But just to give you an idea of what the dates that have been selected, the first one would be September 19th, and that would be at Dennis. And 2 groups would be involved, one at 2, from 2 to 2:45, and then one from 2:45 to 3:30.
And this way, one board member could, I mean, that's all we would need, one board member, and that one board member would be attending 2 different meetings.
And then the second one is September the 26th, and that would be at Test. And there would also be 2 separate groups, the first one being at 1:45 to 2:30, and then the second one beginning at 2:30 to 3:15. And then the third one would be at Hibbard, and that is, actually, there's a choice here. It would either be September the 30th or October 3rd.
And that would be on board availability, I would guess.
Okay. And 2:30 to 3:15, and it looks like that perhaps the thinking is to run 2 groups at the same time.
So under the best circumstances, we would have at least 2 board members with us.
On that day.
We're
So-
not just talking about 5th graders. I know we had talked about 5th graders and 9th graders
At
at
that
one
one, we
point.
might be a little more flexible.
At Dennis and Test, are we talking just 5th graders?
Pretty much just 5th graders
Oh,
at
okay.
Dennis and Test.
Okay.
And then the next one is at the high school, and I have 2 different dates. The first one is October 1st for 9th grade, and that would be from 2 to 2:45. And then the second group, which would be 10th grade, is on October 2nd, and that would also be from 2 to 2:45. So how do you want to, do you want board members to respond, or do you want to send something out for us to respond to?
We can put this same chart out, or we can do
The meeting maker,
Google,
whatever you call that.
whatever that's called.
Doodle poll.
Doodle poll.
There you go.
And get some feedback that way.
Okay.
At least you know what the dates are now. And we have not set the post-high school group yet until this is finished. Now, what I'd like for you to do is to look at the flip chart over here. And I'm not saying that these are the questions and this is the way they must be worded, but this is sort of what we've talked about being some
Yeah.
discussion starters for all of you. We need to structure the students' thinking so that when they meet with you, they have had some time to think about what it is that you're wanting to hear from them. And basically, why we're talking to these particular groups is to get a feel for the pathway that they've just come through and what kind of advice they would have for us to help structure that experience for those students who are starting along that pathway. So the first question we have is, what was the most important thing that elementary or middle school or high school did to prepare you for what you're doing today? And the other question is, if you knew 2 years ago what you do now, or that could be 3 or 4 years ago, how might that have changed or influenced your decisions then? Now, those are just 2 places to begin, and I invite you to talk about what we might do to revise those questions or add to the questions.
I like that second question.
Except for 5th graders. That's a bit of a sophisticated question for a 5th grader. the second one, maybe.
Well, I was going to ask too, would it be possible, because these are time slots of 45 minutes, and sometimes it's hard for kids to think through,
Yeah.
could they have these questions ahead of time?
Oh, yeah,
That
that's
was
what this
the
is
intent,
about.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
So do you think there's any need to, it seems like we're talking in the past, so do you think there's any need to talk about the future of what their
What their expectations are?
expectations
to
are.
prepare them for the next level?
But in 45 minutes, if you have 7 or 8 kids, you're not going to get lots of questions. And we are looking for help in framing and articulating what has happened in the previous section, right,
Okay.
to help move them forward.
Well, so,
Which in a way, we're having that conversation with the older kids about the future of
Yeah.
the, I mean, you're just trying
Yes,
to
the future is based on the input of those who have just experienced
through
that
it.
phase.
Right.
okay.
And these are really general, so what would you like to have them focus in on?
Well, we have to, I mean, I'm open for that conversation, but I think you have to be careful on how much you focus, because you might be focusing to the point that they don't share with you something that could have been valuable.
I guess I just want them to understand the question, understand what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Aaron?
With your thought in mind, Linda, because that was something that I thought about too. How about if to add, instead of today, tomorrow, that last word on that first?
Or just do today or tomorrow.
But
Well, throw something to think about tomorrow.
we are doing this because our mission is to prepare college and career-ready citizens. And part of what we are after is how we are articulating and planning the path they're on to get to that particular point. So is there a reason, and part of what you were saying suggests, and sometimes the question can educate as much as get response from folks, and you really want a dual purpose question. So we don't, I know we care what they're doing today, but do we want to imply that they have a future, not what is the future that they're thinking about? So prepare you for the career you're thinking about or college you're thinking about.
Well, I guess that's what I was thinking when I said what I said, because that's what we really
That's why we're after
are
this.
trying to do, is for them to be thinking about their pathway.
So is there a reason, this is a pretty sophisticated question. Is there a reason to start the conversation, especially with fifth graders, with what are you thinking about your career? Are you thinking about college? And then what has happened in school to prepare you to think about those things? Is that at a level that they could answer?
Aaron?
Well, for those sixth graders, if you talk about their career, let it be their educational career over the next 3 or 4 years. What are you planning on your educational career? Because by the time they get to high school, they're going to have some options on what types of classes to take to prepare them for life after graduation. For those who may be 9th, 10th, 11th, 9th, and 10th grade, then we may be able to talk about what is your, the preparation for their career plans. For the fifth graders, the educational career, the pathway that they're going to take over the next few years. For the 9th and 10th graders, how it's preparing you for the career that you're looking at. It's just simply with the group that we're working with, just modify the phrasing or modify the verbiage of the conversation from immediate educational career or plans to the 9th and 10th graders to immediate whether it be college or career plans.
Well, I think that especially with the fifth graders, we have to be pretty careful because I don't know how many conversations they have actually been engaged in to talk about their pathway or their career.
Which is exactly what we ought to find out.
Yeah,
I mean, that's partial, that's
this
part
could
of what
be-
we want
that
to
could be
find out.
helpful to find out.
So why fifth grade? I'm just really concerned that fifth graders are still too new to fifth grade to be thinking beyond, I got to find my lunch,
We're
I
trying
got
to
to find
get
my
to
locker.
what did you learn in K through, like, without, we're trying to be positive about it, but what would you have done differently in K through 4? We're trying to learn a little bit about that part of their path. And so the idea, I think, was to catch the kids at the transitions that still have fairly recent memories of what happened last year.
The irony is we're all talking about that. We probably ought to talk to some fifth grade teachers who would probably know how to frame a question.
Because I do agree that that's a pretty sophisticated question
Yeah.
for a fifth grader who we could say that they're really closer to being a fourth grader, end of the year fourth
So
grader.
maybe sixth graders are better. I mean, they've had a little bit of,
Yeah, and to be able to look back on their elementary and think, what did,
Should have
you
played
know,
kickball
Yeah.
5 days a week.
I'm sorry, I've been bored. But the college students, the post-secondary,
That's a group I'm interested in.
which is interesting to me, but I hope we have two different groups, or maybe integrate the groups. But the folks who are at Ivy Tech and or in a career now would be very important to hear from, as well as the folks in the 4-year undergraduate college programs would be really important to hear.
Well, there's a third group, and that would be a group that never made it through high school.
That's exactly right.
And that's another group we're talking about.
Agree.
Well,
The,
Aaron just wrote me a note. We'll talk to
Before you
Excel
say-
about that.
Excel.
The challenge here is, I mean, this is all, we have to be careful also that we don't talk to students about a particular stage in their school career who are too far from that stage to have some,
Remember it.
not to be, I hate to say their experiences are now cluttered, but they have been
Sure they
occupied
are.
by other more recent experiences that could cloud their judgment on what that previous path was. And that's why I think when we talked about this the last time, we thought it was so important to ask people who are at those transition points to
Yeah,
look back
that's
and
probably
help
true.
us talk about the questions that need to be asked for that pathway. So the future also is very important too, and I think we could ask some
Yeah.
very interesting questions about their future to determine how much
Yes.
future planning they are doing. That could be very important.
Well, and the whole management of expectations element is very, very intriguing to me too, because this idea of what do they really know, or what are the rumors that they think they know.
which would definitely help us in our planning,
Right.
you know. So, you
Well,
know,
This first time, you will know which questions to ask the next time, because they'll tell you.
I agree.
And we're,
right, we might just need to play it kind of by trial and error, and
why don't you read your?
if we need to change
Kathy
some
has a
things
couple.
for the.
Listen, when you were in elementary school, did you talk about going to intermediate school following your education? What were those conversations like? What would have helped? It's that kind of simple question that might get us where we want. It'll be different, I would think, for each level of student.
Kelly?
How are they going to, how are the students going to be chosen, or are they?
Good question.
I'm not putting any parameters on that.
Well, I
I'm
was
leaving that up
just
to the
thinking, we
principals.
want to make sure to hit
diverse.
the ones that are struggling.
Broad-based.
What would have helped, you don't want to just get the successful, the ones who
We
made
want a
that
diverse
transition.
group.
Yeah, and also at the 10th grade level, like maybe the alternative kids would be
Yeah.
very helpful. And
Career ed
letting
kids
us,
and-
well, they could go back and say, well, if I had had this at 5th grade or this at 6th grade, that might be helpful to us.
I'll just say broad, diverse group. That's
Yeah.
what we need in every.
And we need to make sure that they know what the purpose is too. So should we state a purpose
That's a good point.
so that each, when
You
they-
mean so the people who are selecting the students are clear on why
Yes.
we're doing this?
We can create a document. In fact, that's probably how this will go out, would be by way of a document talking about what the board's hoping to get accomplished and what the goal has been, what our strategy is to try to get there, and this is part of the strategy setting
I think that would set it.
process. Well, I think we have some ideas. If we could go into the strategic plan then. I think we talked about the last time that some of our goals, such as ensure that 90% of the RCS students K-12 are reading at or above grade level by 2020. We began last year by taking a look at where we were and then projecting forward. This year, it would be a little different because it's based on last year's results, so that we may change our trajectory a bit. And we have put some pieces in there that I think you might look at, and I think those are fairly stable. That one is fairly stable, is it not? And that would start at 70.9% for last year, with our goal being 76.4% this year. Now, we can go through each of these, but I do want you to know that I don't know that it's necessary to go through every single one of them. Some of these are going to be determined by our ISTEP scores. Our ISTEP scores are now in. There are some undetermined numbers that are being factored out. Dr. Parker was working on that today. It didn't make its way into your document, nor should it yet, until the state has determined whether they agree with us, and they don't normally agree with us. So we'll put that in there when it's final. Also know that there are some action steps. For example, let's go to target 1.3, ensure that 90% of the RCS students demonstrate age-appropriate proficiency in the use of personal technology. We talked about some strategies last time, and this is still a rough draft. For example, Mr. Tidrow and I have talked about, as an action step, actually doing a book study. This wouldn't necessarily be the whole staff, but a book study involving Every Child, Every Day. We are looking at that book. We're studying that book, but it may be that we want to do a book study with the principals, perhaps the technology committee, and a group of our teachers, particularly those who are involved in technology. Also bear in mind that this is by 2020. It's not necessarily a goal that we're going to get to in the course of 1 year, and for that reason we'll try to establish some benchmark data on all these. On, let's see, where do I want to take us? Okay, focus area 3, marketing and communication. Misty Hollis is not with us this evening, but you'll notice that there are some blanks here. That group is coming together under her direction and populating that with some perhaps new steps, and some of these are going to be interesting. For example, on target 3.3, ensure that 90% of the stakeholders are very satisfied or satisfied. We're talking about at the conclusion of the year having a survey, but we're also talking about maybe some mid-year points where we can get an opportunity to do some in-flight changes in order to make some differences, so at the end of the year we do affect some better responses. 3.32. Elisa Stewart and I just talked about an article that was in the newspaper. I think it was on Sunday. Ritz-Carlton now does some customer service training.
Yeah, I read that.
Kind of an interesting idea. And
For schools.
For schools. And we've talked about having that kind of service training. We've done it before with our clerical staff, but maybe doing it for administrators, teachers, food services, bus driver, everyone,
Board members.
board members.
Well, they said they were going to have an online thing with that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And what's interesting about that one, ensure that all customer friendly, but the second part of this statement is even more important in some ways in today's marketing world in the day of recruiting students. Customer service means we keep the students we have, probably, but the next is implement systems to share the positive RCS story with current and prospective families. That means we're all marketers, and we haven't all behaved in that way.
Yeah, we have put a lot of nice tools out there, but until we change behavior,
Absolutely.
and that's what this is
And
all about.
attitude, which leads before behavior.
Ensure that 95, this is 3.4, ensure that 95% of the stakeholders rate communication with RCS as excellent or very good. This is going to be something that I think needs to be a work in progress throughout the year rather than a survey now and then. One of the conversations that we had at the last parents group that I had last week, in fact, I'd say the bulk of the meeting focused on communication.
Maybe 99.9%.
It was on communication, and perhaps it was more focused in some spots than others, but the messages were good for all areas of the school corporation.
Going back to the positive story, I mean, I think it'd be a great idea to seek all the help that we could possibly seek, but I just want to also remind us that we have some, the PALs, who I think do an excellent job with many of our parents and so forth. And I think that would be a great resource for us to tap into and to work maybe a little more closely with them.
At one point, I thought we, the board, said we're going to create some talking points that were consistent and that we could all use, not just the board members. Didn't we say we were going to do that?
Absolutely.
And so we may need to figure out how to do that.
You may have, you also talked about that in a conversation with me about talking points per month.
Yes.
Yeah,
And we may need to be looking at those updates,
yeah.
because you do get talking points.
They're
in
there. It's just a matter of
drawing them out. And
We're talking about concise, precise, but we may even want to be able to expand it to the whole staff and all of our folks. I don't know.
I don't know that the staff, we might have to put one talking point per month for it to be consistent.
Sure.
Well, across the district.
Sure.
But as I was looking at those last few updates, they're there.
They're packed.
They are.
They're packed.
And maybe I just need to highlight some areas for you as.
And we
because I
need
use
practice
those.
in how to use them, how to insert them in conversations we have.
Dixie?
Well, in that also, about telling the positive RCS story to prospective families, getting that consistent so that it's the same for everybody that comes in, and do we have, I mean, what kind of red carpet treatment do we do? Do we have packets? Do we have stories that we can give people? How do we present that? Do we give them tours, and is it consistent for for all new families that's moving into our community?
We've made progress there. I think we have maybe another
But
level.
it's still kind of hit. I think
Yeah,
it's still
I
hit
think
and
that's what I'm
miss.
saying. There's been some real nice progress, but
In a board-to-board development session yesterday, sponsored by the foundation, Mr. Loring came in and talked about the staff focus, the organizational focus on public relations. And he used the issue of colleges. Indiana University, for example, he said, has a public relations firm in the foundation, in the IU Foundation. They employ about 150 people. Then the athletic department has its own promotion. And you can go down the list. IU employs almost 500 people just in promotional activities. And he said if you go to private high schools, private colleges, you'll find a huge list. And then his question to all the not-for-profit agencies out there was, how many do you, as an organization, employ? 0. He asked from the schools, what do schools employ? Most of us missed the mark on that. So that may be something that we want to think about, because development is going to be an issue, I think, for public schools in the future.
Absolutely.
And that was going to be my next question. Do we have a person that would be in charge of that?
Well, yes, we do have, I mean, that would fall under Misty's responsibility and Bridget's.
But are we overloading people so that that doesn't,
And it's
you know, it really needs to be a defined job. It's
does.
probably part-time, but for now, but it needs to, that really needs attention, and it needs someone that can go at the drop of a hat. I mean, you know, you don't know when these people are coming.
The realtors do call us now and then when they have people coming through Richmond, and they want us to provide some kind of opportunity for them to see the schools. And we've all dropped what we have going and make sure we can be there. I've done it a few times. It's actually fun. But that needs to be probably an orchestrated and
Yes.
well-tuned,
Yes.
finely tuned
I guess there's a
activity.
way to leverage the resources we have now and create some systems so that many people can do that. But as you said, when you get the call, then there's a crew, and someone can be thrown into action, and then there's a system for doing
Well,
that.
and the follow-up too, do we, you know, sending
Yes.
out thank yous for choosing our school system when they do enroll, and I don't know, there's a whole lot of things that you could do to make it more rounded and a better approach.
Not to mention the visits to, like, the talking points. We could all be on the team we all go to things. We're all at organizational meetings. Why couldn't we be the person who might make that presentation on a given day? And some of you and some of the teachers and some kids, and just a matter of having the talking points and understanding how to use them. And then we could be a crew of a lot, even though we maybe have a half-time person who's doing the job. So that's how I would do it.
Aaron?
At the risk of sounding like I'm going to spend taxpayers' dollars on this, I kind of disagree with the aspect of having someone as a part-time. If you're saying part-time, then it means that we're only partly, my thought is that we're not going to emphasize it enough. I would like to see the possibility of, Suzanne, you know, gathering our resources, that we could look and find someone who that would be, you know, their calling, their avocation, and that is to be the spokesperson to go out there to, whether it be realtors, whether it be business, whether it be prospective businesses, you know, locally, statewide, globally, or something, to eat, sleep, drink Richmond Community Schools, to go out there and do that. Now, under that person, then you have the 4 or 5 or 6 people who also are part of those speaking points who do this. But that person actually develops those speaking points in a manner that, as times change, as the economy, as the complexity of the community, complexity of the state changes and everything else, they're abreast of that, so that that is their full-time focus, so that they do that on a full-time basis. That's just my opinion. And it doesn't really have to cost that much either.
Well, and not everybody that moves into our community goes through a realtor. Not everybody buys a house. You know, I mean, we need to make sure that we are advocating to everyone.
Businesses.
Apartment managers, businesses.
Churches.
And the other thing, a lot of people who come, when they start looking, they're getting information that is not factual through Facebook and other areas, they're getting mixed messages. We need to be able to present them from the get-go with factual information about our school system.
Do we have a packet that is available?
I don't know that we have a set packet. Every building has its own approach, and that's something we could probably
Actually,
standardize.
the strategic plan, we had the things from Misty added, and one of the action steps is to create a media kit for every building so that they all have a consistent message.
And I think we have talked about what a media kit should include. It's just a matter of putting that together, and we have new buildings. We had new buildings last year, in a sense, and we now have new histories. So it's time to re-examine that whole packet.
And
Make
the
the
key is not to be reactive and sit and passive and wait. It is to go visit the president and dean at Earlham and IU East and those. But when a recent article that came across my desk from the foundation world said that education foundations are beginning to hire those kind of people for the school system. So that kind of strikes the imperative and urgency to get the thing going.
Well, I wanted to talk some of those steps over with you because this is still in flux, and even when we come back to you with these strategies fairly well organized, as I hope we can, particularly after we have our conversations with the students, this all still needs to be discussed point for point in our estimation with the REA so that we have their involvement and input in it as well. And we're
As soon as I
well on our way with
retire
that.
from this board, I have 6 months. Yeah, 6 more. But
I do have a question, though. Let's go to target, or focus area number 6, school culture. And 6.2, target 6.2, ensure that 95% of students demonstrate engagement in positive educational practices. Now, that's your wording. Think back to when you crafted that statement. Tell me exactly what you were thinking with positive educational practices.
Where are we?
6.2.
6.2,
Page
10.
page 10.
And tell me what you mean by engagement. Are you talking about daily engagement, classroom engagement, extracurricular engagement? What were you thinking?
Was our attempt to quantify joy of learning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it started.
Yeah.
Would you say that again, Suzanne?
That it was our intent to quantify the joy of learning. And what we said was we believe that engagement of students is a way to, that joy is demonstrated.
All right.
Remember, we had the conversation about,
And
it doesn't
didn't
mean
we,
you aren't doing,
I thought we heard from you all that when principals observe in rooms, they can tell whether students are engaged
So
in
you're
the
talking
process.
about classroom experiences. Okay.
I think.
But positive educational practices, that could be in other areas.
It could be pretty broad.
Sure.
I think we were talking about the joy of learning. Right, you see 6.1 above that.
Because there's different ways to engage kids.
So that's my question. Would we be approaching your thoughts on this if we went broader or more narrowly? You know, we talked about the classroom. We've talked about the classroom many times. But are you looking at, like I said, extracurricular involvement? Chad keeps very close count on that. That would be one quantifiable way.
measure too.
Well, remember, it had something also to do with early on students identifying their gifts and talents and then being able to engage in activities that promoted those. So you find somebody who's an artist, making sure
Right.
that those opportunities are there. Somebody who's in
Music
music
and
or
drama and
physics,
all of it.
so that it was it was tied, as I recall, back to the pathway conversation with helping kids identify their gifts and talents and putting them on a pathway, educational. Now, that's my memory, which is not always good.
Okay.
And I interrupted Aaron.
You did?
I did. Because he had his hand up and I didn't.
Oh, probably a thought that's gone
Point
by
of
now.
order.
Oh, that was helpful. I don't
But
have
that's
any-
only my recollection.
Well,
I don't have my notes.
Everyone's.
engagement. We talked about the fact that we want engaged learners, and I remember us having the conversation, the difference between just because they're not doing something that's fun doesn't mean they're not engaged.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where that came from, where we sort of talked about joy in the first 6.1, in sort of in the fun realm. We also wanted to be sure that success and learning and progress also demonstrated joy and engagement. And I think that's where those came from. That would be my recollection.
Something important. Suzanne, would you just clarify, just because it's not fun, doesn't mean it's not,
Engage. We just talked about the difference.
'Cause it's very
between-
important.
Right. We talked about the difference between sometimes multiplication tables aren't always fun, but they're important, and they can be engaging, and, or that's. You said, I remember your conversation, I can't remember the struggle. You said sometimes there's a struggle. Well, that would not probably be defined as joy. It's someone struggling is engagement, and it is moving them forward. And I guess that's what I see.
But it
in
could be
those two.
end up being joy.
Because they had
Result.
victory and
Result.
had
Yeah.
results.
And that's the reason I asked you to explain that is because, we can qualify and sometimes quantify joy by what we see, by our expectations of what we consider joy.
Joy and fun aren't
I scored a
synonymous.
touchdown, okay, that's joy. I just got through my multiplication table, that's engaging, and I'm very joyful now because,
done.
one is visual there, and the other one is something that is more personal that the rest of us can't see. However, it means just as much to that person in their engagement than the person, pardon the expression, who scores the touchdown.
one of those funny things, those conversations that after you look back at it and you think that was sort of, it felt silly, but it's not silly because of because of how important it is. We do want kids to be engaged in learning, but we also want them to love it.
Yeah. And take
Well, and-
ownership in it.
And that's what it is. It's when you begin working really hard and you don't realize you're working.
And you
So-
and you make progress.
And you make progress and you
Success.
feel good about yourself because you're achieving.
Well, and kids are going to call it fun because
Yes, they will.
the word joy isn't a word that
It's
they
not a kid word.
So they will call it fun, and that's okay.
And I think we need to emphasize, there have been critics of the board goals for this year. It needs to be emphasized, we have not, or you have not, approved a set of goals that didn't include everything that you've had for the last almost 10 years now.
That's right.
Looking at the hard quantifiable results and holding us responsible and accountable for that. Nothing's been taken off the table that has been deemed important by the community and its spokespeople. And this is another set of goals that helps to balance that we've been doing for the last few years. And I think it's important for everyone to know. Nothing's been taken off.
Yeah.
Well, and I also want I hope that we're very careful in, as we move forward with the joy of learning, or celebrating the joy of learning, that it doesn't become a contrived type of activity that teachers and kids and whoever are given assignments, to relate that joy of learning. I just hope that we're very careful
Well,
that
that's
it's
another
not
reason
contrived.
why you get engagement in there too, in my opinion. Because again, I didn't want it to become another checkbox either.
Yes, that is so important, and that's what kind of makes me nervous about.
We did something fun today. Okay, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, and to have to put a percentage that we're going to achieve this. So.
In the United Way Vision Council work that I participated in, it talked about students will take responsibility and ownership for their own success. And so part of what we're looking at is the process of education. The quantifiable results are a measurement, but how do we get there? I think that's what we were trying to show, that we weren't just, quite frankly, teaching to the test, but encouraging true ownership and personal responsibility for learning. And that's where the engagement and the joy came along. So I think if we speak about it in terms of the desired outcome, is that kids will take ownership of the learning process, and you do that through experiencing that success and that joy and meaningfulness. And so when you frame it that way, people began to understand it a little differently than when you just say, oh, let's celebrate the joy of learning. No, we're looking at the process, and the desired outcome is kids who are responsible for their own and take ownership.
Well, and I wanted to say, too, that you can't measure every single thing that you do in school. I mean, you just can't.
We try to.
We try to. But some of the things on here are more drivers for helping us get to those
Yeah, that's right.
measurable results. Joy of learning, engagement of parents, things like that. Those are research-based things that we know help kids succeed. And so that is why they're on here. They are not measurable, but they do drive the measurable outcomes that we want. So,
Well said. Good.
That's also very helpful.
fantastic. Okay.
Okay. Good conversation. We are to our public commentary point. Anyone in the audience wishing to speak this evening?
What are we going to talk about? We have a couple of
Nope.
things to talk about.
Okay. We are ready for follow-up old business.
I don't have anything on mine.
Okay, I have.
Is this where we're going to talk about students?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
We have like three things that.
Okay.
First of all, I would like, each of you should have received a copy, a draft of the new board member handbook. And so I was wondering if you had any comments. Pat?
In the spirit of in doing what we say we want other people to do, there's no accountability section in this handbook. What happens if people don't do what we indicate they're supposed to do as a good board member?
The public votes us out.
Well, but that's only every 4 years. But I mean, I don't know quite what that would look like. I looked at the Pennsylvania ethical statement, and maybe we need the ISBA, the Indiana School Board Association, has a statement of ethical behavior, which might be something we want to.
And that's
put in there.
included.
That's actually
Yeah.
in there.
I saw that in the list. But I mean, the acknowledgement that we need to be held accountable for the way we say we're going to behave. I just thought that was an interesting.
Well, if you think of how we can,
Well, we asked them to measure impossible, so we better figure out how to measure.
Dixie.
Well, we're evaluating everybody in the system but us.
Yep.
And there is a board evaluation.
That's true.
Through ISBA, so why aren't we doing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that would be.
So
Thank you. That's where I would
a good
fit.
point.
Mhm.
I think we tried that a few years ago, didn't we?
We never, we never,
Got nervous.
no, I just don't think we found the tool that really was realistic.
Well, and the environment was changing so fast. It was just hard to.
Well, and I think there are different evaluations out there. We can look at ISBA. We can, kind of do some comparing and pick and choosing and.
Well, when we first started, we tried to do it after every meeting. Remember, we checked this,
I
this,
remember
this,
that.
and that was
That's what I'm saying.
that was
realistic
overkill.
and useful.
Yeah.
It has to be useful for a changing behavior and changing structure, and it
Well,
is.
this is sort of an end of the year, just like you do everybody else. End of
Sure.
the year.
Well,
I think we need to do that.
We could use that for our board development
Right.
to discuss it.
Find out where the holes were, maybe, or whatever.
So that's a great idea. Kelly?
Did you go through this, Dr. Borf, and give your input?
There are some pieces almost every cabinet member could be sharing with an incoming board member. It's kind of broken down like that. Bob could talk about how finances are determined, how they're laid out, how they're monitored. Elisa could talk about the issues of human resources and what they're responsible for and the milestones during the year. I mean, that's what we would do. And, of course, those change from year to year, too.
Sure.
So it would have to be flexible, but you could almost organize the central office reports with a prospective board member or incoming board member around the structure of the cabinet.
Yes, Dr. Borf did. He has gone through and he made notes, and I made the changes as appropriate.
Oh, I erased them all.
Well, but Jeff erased them all, so we're back to.
Well, I thought it did a good job of staying out of what we shouldn't be in. I mean, I think this is a great idea. Now, in the district documents and materials, board members will be provided a storage device. When will we be, who's doing that?
Well, Pam was doing it, and it's when the storage device that she's preparing is just a flash drive.
Right. But it will have all these on it?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
And I also like the
Oh, God, that didn't work.
websites to explore and resources. I think that's good.
Well, and if you notice that I think at the very end, we put that this document, it needs to be reviewed.
Every year.
Every year.
Living document, yeah.
And it's not just for new board members, but it's for us also, especially with all the documents that we're going to have on a flash drive that we can just turn our flash drive in and they can update as the documents are updated. And we'll have all that information on one piece of equipment. So, and if you want to make a hard copy, you can, but if you don't, you can.
Yeah.
So we tried to think of everything that we could, that we utilize, and that information that we receive, and so that I know Pat has talked about cleaning out and having all of these papers and so forth. So hopefully we will help in conserving our trees.
And the flex and the changing. I mean, nothing is the same this year as it was even 2 years ago.
When I volunteered to be part of the group, whether Linda wants to admit it or not, she put out an initial document, an initial draft document that was just far beyond what I thought we were going to do. So, I mean, 99% of the document,
She did it.
she did it.
Good.
So,
And we want people to know
I mean,
that.
it was, I was just blown away. I was like, you really want me to give you some advice? I mean,
Well, you did. You guys, we met and we kind of laid out, what we thought should go in it. And
but she did a fine job.
so hopefully we will be able to soon get it all.
We have the first flash drive made, so it's a matter of just reproducing that.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Well, and much of the stuff came from, obviously, the materials came from ISBA.
Right.
And, that was really easily done because Michael Adamson or Pam had already gone to the website and gotten that information, but so we could just copy it right on. but it's all information that will be readily available for us.
Just imagine how many trees could have been saved if someone had created a flash drive 30 years ago.
Well, honestly, that was, Jeff came up with the idea of putting, because, we thought about, goodness, being a new board member and being handed a packet of,
2 big notebooks, 3
Yes.
binders is what it was.
that would just about overwhelm
Yep.
anyone.
Linda, 16 years ago, that's what our board packet was per meeting in a binder, about that thick. And, I say that only to bring to light, again, the point that you're making. The things have changed in 16 years. Our basic board responsibilities have remained the same. They've been tweaked even more, but it continues to change with the ever-changing needs of districts and the state. And I guess as I show appreciation to you all for putting that together, it's incumbent upon us to not only to read it, but to live by it and to abide by it. It's my hope that we consistently become an exemplary board identified by the state. And that's one of the things that, whether it be through the evaluation of each other or this individually as a board, but to have this in place, it not only validates our responsibilities individually and collectively, but also what, the public can look and say, hey, that's a board that really it has their documentation and they abide by it. So, and it probably makes a smoother transition for the newest person coming on.
Well, I think it'll help every existing board member.
Yeah. Sam?
Yes.
Just given our earlier conversation and how important it seemed to everyone, and because I can't recall, is somewhere in all these documents the importance of communication and the fact that we are spokespersons for our district? Is that addressed in there somewhere? Board responsibilities probably, but I'm wondering if we shouldn't elevate that since clearly it's important to us.
There are places where it does spell out our obligations, and it talks about, being a board member is hard. I mean, it's a difficult thing, and how we need to communicate, but there isn't a separate, I don't think there's a separate section just on communication. So
Well,
if
and
you
I guess
think,
I'm more thinking not just the business of communication, but the business of selling ourselves.
Yeah.
Because
there is something in there that does mention
Yeah.
that, but maybe we need
I
to
don't know.
expound on that a little bit.
I know I
It's very
read it
important to
somewhere
everybody.
in here.
Well, it's in a lot of the ISBA stuff about board responsibilities. It talks about, for lack of the right terms in the top of my head, cheerleader, being the person who, one
Well,
part
and
of
they
our
have a-
responsibility is selling ourselves to the public, but
There, one document is called Shouldering a Responsibility, and I think I referenced that right at the very
Yes.
beginning on the, if you're wanting to run, you should read that document because it does spell it out.
One of the things I noticed as I was cleaning out all those file cabinets is truly things are not the same. We don't do budgeting the same way. Money follows the child, the I-steps, the different terms, so on and so forth. But what I've noticed more than anything was the context in which we work is very, very different. We are a business competing for business, and we are not just a public school system. And how you frame that so
that's what
that
I'm asking.
people who, I guess maybe that's what you're trying to, how you frame that so that people start right away realizing that we are in a different environment. And because anybody who runs will have gone to school at a time when you went to the public school nearest you and you didn't have choices, you didn't have to
Build it and they will come, kind of.
exactly, build it and you will come, that's exactly right. So I don't know how you generate that, whether that's in the conversation or in a cover letter that comes
Well,
with
there's
it.
also an introduction. There's a within the first 30 days, there's a meeting. I mean, that should actually be a face-to-face conversation. I
Right.
think.
I mean, the impact and the implications of the context in which we now do public school businesses makes our job very, very different.
And once this is completely put together and we make copies and so forth, our next order of business will be to think about how we are going to go about educating our first person with this document, and setting a date for that and determining how we as a board wish to go about doing that.
But the other thing I'm really concerned about, and I don't know whether it fits here, is getting good people to run for the board. Recruitment, because we are not partisans, which means a party doesn't go out and recruit somebody to run. And so how do we as a board, what is our responsibility to get people to run?
Well, and maybe, do you think we need a section on what protocol we want to use for doing that?
I don't even know if I don't know that it fits here, but
I don't know.
I wouldn't put it in
Does
the handbook.
ISBA have a model for that? If they don't, I would suggest that we don't, because I think that this is something that they would have thought about and being important enough for the board to have included in
Maybe
that.
I'll call Michael Adams.
Do that.
Yeah, do about that.
Absolutely.
I mean, we could have an informational meeting.
Right.
We could do something like that, I guess, but I don't.
There are boards that are pretty aggressive at recruitment. That doesn't mean that the people they recruit serve on the board, but the people that they recruit are people that they pull into committee structures and orient them to the processes, and those people then determine to what extent they're committed to serving with the board, and many of them do get into the races for.
Well, and if you think about where we got Suzanne and then Kelly, they had been involved at the committee level, the Resources for Results. And so when I looked around at the parent group the other night, I thought, that's the place. Folks who get in on the ground floor and they begin to see how things work. They're the ones.
PALS people.
Yeah, PALS people,
that
right.
have a little. Then there's a jump start. That's very helpful.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to underscore the evaluation that you're talking about, the evaluation process and instrument, because that's where you as a board could put an emphasis on all the responsibilities that you have. I mean, if you tried to evaluate every responsibility that a board member has, I think it would be an inch deep.
Right.
But if you focus on what you need to be doing as a board and then judge yourselves at the end, communication may be a big issue one year. It wouldn't necessarily be another year.
Well, and what's different, even all seven of us probably have a different definition of exactly what the responsibility of board members are. I mean, there's some commonalities, but there's also some differences. So, I mean, maybe the evaluation model would reduce it from 1,000 responsibilities down to 3.
Or as you said, just which ones are we focusing?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got some more work to do here, so.
You'll handle that, right, Linda?
We will. Committee.
We.
The other thing that I wanted to bring before you was at our last meeting, we had a conversation on student engagement at the board level. And we're doing that with our pathways conversations. But that is not a continual, consistent way of doing that. So I wanted to continue that conversation and just pick your brains as to what you're thinking about how we go about making that a consistent conversation engaging our students. So has anybody thought about it, or Kelly?
One thing that stuck with me after the conversation last time is that you wouldn't want the same group of students. It would depend upon the issue that you want input.
Exactly.
And there are some issues that students won't be interested in giving input, but there are others that would affect, different groups of students. So I don't know if you put, first of all, we need to have something stated as the purpose of having the students involved so they understand what their mission is in respect to the board. But I don't know if you put someone over there in charge, like it could be the student council, it could be Ray or a counselor or something, where they delegate to the groups the issue. If we let them know that there's an issue that we would like input from the students, if there's a special student group or if it's, different groups.
So are you thinking that it would only be at the high school level?
Well, that's just where I really didn't go past thinking at the high school level.
Okay.
I could see maybe doing it at the middle school. I'm not sure. You'd have to tailor it for each level. We'd almost have to go in to the grade schools. The high school students could come to the meetings, but elementary probably wouldn't.
Pat, did you have a thought?
I am channeling David Stidham here when I ask, what do we want the end result to be? I mean, why are we doing this? What is the desired outcome? It is to give students opportunity. It is to hear students and to give them a voice, not necessarily guarantee that what they say we will do. Jeff and I have spent a fair amount of time looking at policies. I'm not sure, and especially after talking with the lawyers from ISBA this summer, I'm not sure putting this in policy would be very practical. Because, and if you think about it, our first leadership value is to be student-centered. So we could begin with a leadership value as a way to give us permission, I guess, if we needed, or to frame that. If you think about it, there are some very specific questions. I think about the dress code. That would have been a very good time to have specific input from all socioeconomic. But then there are some general questions. Sometimes we'd just like to hear what's on your mind right now about how school is. And I don't want to over-organize it, except from our point of view, to recognize that we need to do it a couple times a year. More than a couple times a year would be a logistical nightmare. So I don't want to organize it from the student point of view. I want to organize it from our point of view. Does that make sense? So,
Well,
a couple of times a year, we want to frame one specific question and maybe a general question.
And that's what I was thinking, that if we don't structure it so that we have it set, then we
won't do
will
it.
tend not to do it, and we'll be right back talking about this again, like we have for several years, and we still, and it could be that we may want to try one format one time, and maybe a different format the other. I mean, I don't know. I think we just need to get our feet wet and see what happens, and we can always tweak it. And I don't know. I was thinking even in terms of something like maybe a town hall meeting type setup, or maybe we could do it before our regular meeting, so that it's 30.
If we do it over there or somewhere.
Well,
yeah.
or maybe we might do it there. We might do it here.
Invite the government. Jeff reminded us at one time, because he had kids on the register. The register does surveys all of the time, and I mean the board wants to know, and I think we'd get some honest feedback.
Well, I guess what would be wrong with starting out with going to the register? I mean, they report and they go to all the school buildings. They go to the athletic events. They go academic events. What would be wrong with us going to the register and say, hey, as a board, they're looking for sponsors all the time. You give us a half of a page every other issue.
I don't think we'd come up with that many questions.
Once
I'm
a
just saying.
trimester.
Yeah, once.
Or, I mean,
yeah.
something that would encourage the reporter with the newspaper to help collect the information from the student body that we're trying to get the information from. I mean,
And I think the first issue, one of our big goals, is attendance I'd go after attendance. You know, and do a survey on attendance. I don't know, I'm not good at formulating those kind of questions. And again, I just spoke over Aaron, who is raising his hand dutifully, and I'll be quiet, Aaron.
That will be in your evaluation.
I know it would be, but I don't have very many more to go, so there you go.
Aaron?
She's counting down 6.
Well, I'm going to, so are you suggesting that we not be face-to-face with the kids?
Oh, we
That
can
it be?
be.
Oh, yeah.
We
Okay.
can be.
A little bit.
But
just
but I
another
think,
form.
but
Okay.
if we
Yeah.
figure out some way that, you know, maybe it's a quarter page or maybe what.
Okay.
If we go to the register and say, we're going to support you, we're going to take this responsibility and we're going to pay for that. Give us a reporter that's assigned to school issues or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe sometimes they'll just report surveys and sometimes they'll report based on what question we want to ask.
Aaron?
And how about using the register as that conduit to raise the question that develops the conversation
There you
between
go.
us?
Good
You know,
idea.
let them, and then we say on a quarterly basis, okay, this was the hot topic from the students. It has generated the question that we as a board want to have the conversation with, the face-to-face conversation with. We've utilized the entire student body through the register, but we've also got to hear basically, you know, maybe the truest responses, and then invite them to come together in the face-to-face meeting. But it'd be
Good idea.
paramount that they know that this isn't just a talking point. This is, we actually want to hear, we want to know what you're thinking to give us direction on how to best serve you. This isn't just some piecemeal thing to come together and say, okay, we have this meeting with the students, and you know what I'm saying. Something that we genuinely, that they know that we're genuinely listening to and concerned about their input. We've received it, now we're going to act on it.
You know,
Pat?
when I mentioned that about attendance, I was really serious. I think I sent some of the stuff to you. One school in New York had an attendance problem at the high school, and they asked students what were their suggestions for correcting it. That is a direct goal of ours, and that is to improve attendance. And so where best to get information about that but from the students. So if we use students to have a voice but to help solve some of the issues we're trying to solve, then that gives them an engaged
That's
time
engagement.
in it. That's it. That's truly engagement. And so first time, what's on your mind, we might pick out 2 or 3 issues to do, but then let's solve some very specific challenges.
Go to our goals and
Absolutely go to the goals
and I mean, there are plenty of things in those goals that we could be talking with our
and
students about.
attendance comes to
that.
mind.
And then if the register, the
Quite
question is
exciting.
raised in the register, but then if they report back after then all the students are going to know that we listened.
That's exactly right.
Kelly?
Another way we could do it, it worked well when we had our work sessions with the public this past winter when you invited specific groups. You could also maybe set aside twice a year where you have a specific work session where you invite specific groups of students. That way you could get it done and you could have, the issues could be timely and, that would make it simple.
Okay. Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
And then the register could report off of that, or the register could be one of the groups or something. I hate to make it too complicated so that
Yeah.
every year, you want something where every year it'll be easy to pick up and do it again. And,
Right.
That's what attracts me to the register, because if you can get a system in place, they could support a system like that from year to year to year.
Okay.
Inviting students, like we did parents, to specific. I would be concerned that we would get the representation from the students to show up to the meetings.
If you invited people, if you invite everyone, no one comes, but if you invite specific people.
well, and
we'd
you know
probably
that
try to
government
make
That's what we would
class,
have to do.
in the government class, they have to come to a meeting. Why not come to that meeting?
And I would think realistically, it would be easier to get those students to come and to meet with us. First of all, it wasn't at 6:30, it was, let's say, 4 o'clock 4:30, something, but also say, okay, this is a meeting that is going to last, let's say we get started at 4:30, at 6 o'clock, there will be refreshments served. Okay, I'm saying that because if you feed them, they will come, okay? Adult or child alike, but I mean, have the parameters set up, this meeting is going to last for an hour and a half. It'll be intentional conversation, refreshments served, and we're going to act upon.
Of course, the irony of all of this is we ought to go ask the students how they'd get involved. Here we are.
This is true.
Here we are planning.
What would it take?
What would it take? Sometimes I think we, overthink this.
Okay, so how we have lots of ideas on the table, so how are we going to proceed?
Well, we have pathway conversations. After we have pathway conversations that we already have scheduled, we come back together and say, what did we learn about this that we want to then frame the next? But I do like the register. I think a couple of us go visit the register and see what it would take to get something, a survey there. Because every time I look at the register, they do surveys all of the time.
Well, maybe that's, maybe we can be working in concert with the pathways and be doing a little bit of homework. So do I have a couple people that would like to volunteer to go to the register? And
I will.
Aaron and I'll go.
And Pat. All right.
Sure you don't want to,
guys-
Jeff?
Jeff,
No,
you
it's
want to
okay.
go?
But my problem is,
I think I
We
got to
can
work
have
on the
three.
handbook.
Oh, that's right. With your big eraser.
Okay, so then your assignment is
by the next board meeting,
Okay.
you guys are going to report some good news to us. Does that make,
Within this week, and we can schedule a little time to get.
all right, Dr. Borth, do you have any
I go to Nebraska.
input on this?
I'm probably.
Well, my thought is, be very careful about what assignments the teachers have right now. I mean, it should be, with all due respect, this should be worked around their
Absolutely.
schedule, not the board schedule. The other thing that I would encourage the board members to do is they're meeting with the students in these pathways. Go ahead and go there. Ask the students
Yeah.
during that conversation,
Yeah.
how could we provide opportunities for you to speak to us, to have input with us? What would be a good technique? They may come up with something you would never, or adults would never
Right.
think about.
Okay. Good.
And another survey technique, the movement in the high school, they get a lot of contact. They have a lot of contact with kids, and they are in the cafeteria, and they get responses, and I think, there might be that might be a venue for feedback as well.
And something else would be Challenge Day. If a board member has not participated in Challenge Day, that's just an excellent opportunity to gain some insights on our students.
Did I mention it was
absolutely.
January 13th through 16th? Put it on your calendar.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
that's
Quite
a
a
rich
day.
experience.
It was a rich experience. Okay, so we're going to kind of check out the newspaper, okay?
And,
All right.
just get their ideas. Okay, the third thing is our lounge conversations. The first one, I think, is Dixie is going to Dennis, the October 3rd, I believe. And we've kind of chatted about this in the past as to whether we just go to these and meet with the staffs during lunchtime and just let it be open. And then we've also talked about perhaps it would be good to have maybe some talking points or some questions in mind that might be consistent throughout the district. So since these are just beginning, I just wanted to get your thoughts on if we want to just continue to handle it the way it's been done, or do we want to maybe think about asking some specific things that we would like for them to give us input on. Kelly?
Well, it's going to be different every month because, our issues are different every month. So maybe in old business, we can just say, is there any, the meetings this month are going to be, do we just do them once a month or do we do them?
Sometimes they're twice a month, but most of the time we can only do about one a month.
Is there anything that we're looking for?
Well, and maybe it wouldn't be issues. It could be related to our goals, which we're talking about that for our students also. So it doesn't necessarily have to be issue-related, I don't think.
And I also think that after you meet with them, that everyone should write a synopsis.
I ask everybody if they would please do that.
I do think it should be a mix, though. I mean, you might have some focus question that you want to know, but I think you should always leave it open for whatever comments they
You never
want to
know
make.
what's going on at that particular time.
Suzanne?
I agree with that, and it kind of has been that, because usually Dr. Borov has a question in mind that he's, I want to ask about this. But to formalize that a little wouldn't, I don't think, corrupt it at all, but I would be against trying to do away with the free flow conversation, for sure.
Yeah, I don't think
we have learned some things when people feel comfortable and relaxed and it's not too formal and they're just having a sandwich and they're just talking.
It's a good way to start out the conversation, though.
I think the important thing is that that time is used wisely,
I agree.
and that it does give us an opportunity to glean maybe some insight into some things that we otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to.
And remember why we started them. I go back to the purpose. The purpose was to give teachers an informal voice. This is not a board meeting. This is a teacher meeting. My big concern is now that both Test and Dennis are big, do we do two of them? One for 5th, 6th, one for 7th, 8th? And the high school is always it's difficult to get a lot of teachers at the high school. So is there a reason or a way that we can look at the high school and then maybe the intermediate school a little different? The elementary school, we can get most of the teachers in there during one lunch hour, at least part of their lunchtime. Intermediate school, that's a lot of teachers for that time. So maybe we want to look at that. But the high school, I think we have a real challenge. I think we need to think about whether we can accomplish what we want to accomplish at the high school.
Well,
I don't have a suggestion for that,
I'm
because
not
you and I were there and we talked to four
We
teachers,
had
five teachers.
just a handful. And, I talked to some teachers later about that. And I think Suzanne's point is really important, because a lot of teachers don't want to come into lunch and have to talk business.
Absolutely.
Even with us, they don't
Yeah.
want to talk. They like the informality. If they don't feel pressured, they can enjoy their lunch. And there were some people who avoided coming in and talking to us because that was at that point in the year. It's towards the end of the year. They didn't want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Be
think it's useful to
business
find out
focused.
what's important to them, even if it's not school related. Just the whole humanness of the conversation, and if it turns to, we went to Westview one day and there was this whole potluck dinner going on, and I'm like, score. And we had
That happened
had
at
a
Highland
great
once, too.
conversation though, just generally about lots of things, and all of a sudden I think it changed some of those folks' perspective about, and we were able to actually solve a problem that had been nagging at that school for
Right.
how many weeks, but because there was a comfort level. And
Do we need to buy food? Do we need to take pizza?
I don't know. That's another thought, but
Okay, so is the general consensus then just leave it the way it is and
but have a couple of
Well, I think,
points in your pocket. I don't think
how
that's
much how far ahead are they notified that we're there, or going to be there?
good question.
Pam has that scheduled out right now.
Well, but, do the teachers, are they reminded that morning that we're going to be there at lunch that day? Because, in the ones that I've attended, a lot of them like, oh, I forgot you were going to be here today. Or they weren't,
That could be.
and then there's always that cold period, or warm-up period, I should say. That's the positive spin, right?
I know what you're talking
gathering.
about. though.
I mean,
It's just
it's that first 10 or 15 minutes, well, I don't want to be the first one to say anything.
Well, it's the same thing that happens when you sit down next to someone you don't know at the cafeteria. I mean, it's just that same kind of deal.
Well, Jeff, the problem is, when you go, you're with me.
Oh, okay.
And you and I tend to start these meetings the same way. If you were to go with Kelly, she finds out about their kids at college or the babies that back. I mean,
Then they talk.
then
That's
they
right.
talk. The gathering that Pat talks about is so important and well done
exactly.
by some of the board members. And that's what I kind of need, is for someone to be doing that. When you and I are together, we're both waiting
Bring
for
out the
someone
agenda.
else.
Okay, so here are the topics we want to talk about.
They run in and use the microwave and run out, right?
Well, so I'm more, okay, let's get right to it. No.
But that is
It's
how.
that touchy-feely
so
stuff you
that's
love
where-
so much.
It's the warm fuzzies that are missing, Jeff.
Maybe as an idea, I mean, they don't have to discuss it, but here's an idea, is a good idea.
You know, we're doing an advanced facilitation workshop right now, and so probably the 5 of them are watching this meeting, and so I want to make sure I remind them that gathering is the most important thing. I mean, it really is
It is.
important to warm them up and
And maybe
make
when
them
we
feel
go
comfortable.
together, I'll have someone else to join us gathering, because we have some people on the staff who
You have
can
some
do that.
warmer-uppers.
Gatherers.
But it's also difficult because there are so many lunch groups.
That's
Yeah.
true.
And so the
right.
gathering has to happen.
Over and over and
A little
over.
quicker,
Yes.
too.
And you don't have a lot of time. And so, it's,
But I think we've found that by the second and third, the other teachers are already talking, so you don't really have to go back to square one.
Not all the way, anyway.
And let me just say, something. It isn't all me, because he carries a little bit more weight, and maybe
We know that.
People may be a little bit more threatened to be more open in front of.
No, they've seen the board meetings, Jeff.
Nice try, though.
okay, so we will depend on Dr. Borf to have those talking points in his pocket.
Yeah, I can do that.
Well, that was solved.
So, does that make sense? That-
it does.
And I think if it goes out ahead of time and it gives some, because I think sometimes I've found they're not sure what they want to talk about.
So when my husband.
That's
What do
right.
we talk about?
Well, and I think
That
he's right.
varies
I
from
think
building.
sometimes they forget, they haven't been reminded.
Right.
Or maybe
Well,
they
and if
were,
they
and
have
they just had a
that's
whole
right.
morning full of
That
stuff
morning,
that it wasn't
every
at the
morning can just knock your plans right out that you might have had for lunch. So we have to keep that in mind.
So we'll count on Dr. Borf to get the conversation moving, and but
So
if
same old, same old.
well,
If he doesn't have someone, if he can't do it, he'll have someone with him who can.
and then I would like to ask that each of you write up a little, so that we all know what the conversation, how the conversation was, and what the main points were, and if you want to send them to me, or if you just want to send them to all of us, that's great. Okay, good conversation. Hey, we're making good progress here. So let's move into celebrations and so forth. Anybody have anything they want to celebrate tonight?
Publicly
Reflections?
celebrating Brian.
We could.
I think we should publicly celebrate and thank Brian.
I do too.
He has a new job, but we appreciate his honest reporting over the years.
And well, we're going to miss
Honest and
him
fair. We will
tremendously.
miss him. Mhm.
So, Brian, lots of luck in your
And we're happy you're sticking around.
Anything you want to share with us on what you've learned that prepared you for your...
What he's saying is covering the school board has prepared him to.
Forever.
It's certainly been one of the primary things I've done. And I think people will say that at least
You want to come to the podium, please, Brian? You might want to tell the public why we're celebrating you, in case they don't know.
Well, I was going to say, and I think to certainly to other school boards in the county, they've noticed that we've covered you guys certainly
far more aggressively than others.
We've
We've
noticed.
noticed.
And so I've been fascinated a little bit about that. But I've covered this primarily more than anything else, even though we have our hands in so many things at the Palladium item. And I've enjoyed working with all of you, so that's nice to say what you've said. But I'll be going next Monday, starting as Director of Media Relations at Earlham College, and really excited about that opportunity. And you've mentioned staying in Richmond. That was certainly important to me. So I'm excited to continue working here, and really appreciate all the well wishes.
You could come back and visit anytime you want.
Well, I have 2 students at Fairview Elementary, and they're having a great year. So,
Good.
Good.
so that's certainly good.
Bravo.
I'll be watching what you guys are doing.
Well, thank you,
Thanks,
Brian.
Brian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for the good of the cause? We are adjourned.
It's 8:20, that's for the good of the cause.
While it is dark, it is early, so thank you.
You know what, tomorrow.
Oh, no.
Okay, let's go talk to Corey and see what we can
A
do.
teachable moment.
Corey, we need you. We need you.
Did you get that bug?
The block and Z.
Is that the best way to go?